The lights of Manhattan glittered like a million golden promises as a black Rolls-Royce Phantom glided down Park Avenue. Inside sat Elijah Carter, 34, the youngest black CEO to ever lead a Fortune 100 tech company, Carter Dynamics. His sharp navy suit hugged his broad shoulders, and his expression carried a calm confidence that could silence a room. But tonight, something was different. His fingers tapped the leather armrest. His jaw tightened. His eyes, usually steady and sharp, flickered with a storm he didn't show often, because tonight wasn't just business, it was personal. "Mr. Carter," said his driver softly. "We're 5 minutes away." Elijah nodded, staring out the tinted glass at the glowing towers. The Holloway Mansion stood at the edge of Central Park, home of the Holloway family, America's most powerful industrial dynasty. Old money, old power. The kind of family that had written the rules everyone else still played by tonight's. Dinner was meant to finalize a $900 million merger between Carter Dynamics and Holloway Tech Holdings, a deal that could reshape the global tech landscape. And Elijah was about to meet the family behind it all, including Richard Holloway, the patriarch whose handshake could make or break entire economies. As the car stopped, Elijah glanced at the small silver locket on his wrist, his mother's. Inside was a photo, a much younger him, and his mother, Grace Carter, smiling outside a modest home in Atlanta. She was his anchor, his world, the reason he'd ever made it this far. He whispered, "You're the reason I'm here, Mom. Tonight's for us." The mansion loomed before him, all marble columns, fountains and chandeliers visible through massive windows. The kind of place built not for comfort, but for power. A valet opened his door. "Elijah Carter," the young man stammered, clearly recognizing him. "It's an honor, sir," Elijah smiled. "Thank you, son. Keep pushing." He walked toward the doors with his head high, unaware that before the night was over, this place would burn itself into his memory forever. Inside, the Holloway family had gathered like royalty. At the head of the marble-floored hall stood Richard Holloway, silver-haired, tall, with an expression carved from ice. Beside him, his wife Margaret, whose pearls looked older than most nations. And then there was their son, Chase Holloway, the heir apparent, tall, blonde, impeccably dressed, and wearing a grin that was just a little too polite. "Elijah Carter," Richard said, extending his hand. "The man of the hour." Elijah took it firm and steady. "Mr. Holloway, it's an honor." Richard's eyes flicked over him, measuring him like a chess piece. "Quite the rise you've had, young man. Atlanta boy, now sitting at the table with titans." Elijah smiled evenly. "My mother always said, God doesn't care where you start, only how far you're willing to climb." Margaret's lips twitched, not quite a smile. The dinner began in a glittering hall. Crystal chandeliers shimmered over a long mahogany table lined with executives, lawyers, and family members. Waiters moved like shadows, pouring champagne, serving gold-trimmed plates. The conversation was light. At first, Richard spoke of legacy. Chase spoke of innovation. Elijah listened, occasionally chiming in, his words sharp, humble, and wise, and then Richard dropped the first hint of what was coming. "So, Elijah," he said, swirling his wine, "I hear your mother's quite the woman. Self-made, right? Raised you alone?" Elijah smiled proudly. "Yes, sir. She's everything." "Remarkable," Richard said, in a tone that made it sound like a curiosity rather than admiration. "I can't imagine what it must have been like, raising a son in that kind of environment," Chase smirked. "I mean, to go from that to running a billion-dollar company must feel like winning the lottery." A few executives chuckled under their breath. Elijah caught the glances, subtle but loaded. He said calmly, "Luck didn't build Carter Dynamics, gentlemen. Work did." The room went quiet for a second. Richard smiled faintly. "Of course." "Well said," but the tone had changed. The air felt colder. The moment that would change everything began quietly, a voice from the entrance. "Excuse me." "I'm looking for my son, Elijah Carter." Heads turned. There she stood, Grace Carter, 61 years old in a simple lavender dress, her hair wrapped neatly, her eyes filled with pride. She looked out of place among the glittering gowns and tuxedos, but her presence radiated warmth that no wealth could mimic. Elijah stood immediately, shock and joy flooding his face. "Mom?" she smiled softly. "Baby, I didn't mean to interrupt. The driver said this was the dinner. I just wanted to see you before heading back home." He walked over quickly, hugging her. "You're always welcome, Mom. Always." But behind him, quiet whispers. Margaret Holloway's expression froze. Chase leaned toward one of the guests, whispering something that made the man smirk. Richard's smile turned tight. "Ah, Mrs. Carter, is it? How unexpected." Grace beamed. "Yes, sir. It's a blessing to finally meet you all. Elijah's told me so much about this family." Margaret's eyes flicked to Grace's dress, her modest purse, the slight southern accent in her voice. "How quaint," she murmured. Grace didn't hear the tone. "I brought something," she said, reaching into her purse. "A little peach cobbler. Elijah's favorite since he was a boy." The waiters froze. The room fell dead silent. Even the sound of forks stopped. Richard gave a dry chuckle. "How thoughtful," Grace smiled, proud and sincere. "I thought y'all might like a taste of Georgia. Homemade, fresh this morning," Chase whispered to his girlfriend beside him, loud enough for half the table to hear. "I didn't know this was a potluck." A few muffled laughs. Grace blinked, confused. Elijah's jaw tightened. "Chase," Elijah said sharply. "That's enough." But the damage was done. Grace slowly set the dish down, her smile fading. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to overstep. I just—" Margaret interrupted, her voice dripping with politeness. "Oh, don't apologize. It's adorable. We're just not used to such homespun gestures at formal dinners." The laughter that followed was quiet, but it echoed like thunder in Elijah's ears. His mother stood there, humiliated, in front of billionaires who saw her as nothing but a novelty. Her hands trembled slightly. "Elijah, maybe I should go—" He turned to her, eyes fierce. "No, you stay. You belong anywhere I do." The tension stretched tight. Grace excused herself quietly, retreating toward the side of the room, trying to keep her composure. Elijah sat back down, his heart pounding. He could feel Chase's smirk burning into his side. "So," Chase said smugly, "back to the deal. We were discussing whether your company can handle the scale of a $900 million integration." Elijah's voice was cold steel. "We can handle anything." "Oh, I don't doubt it," Chase said, sipping his wine. "You've clearly learned to adapt to different environments." Richard chuckled, as if that were witty. Margaret smiled behind her glass. Grace stood by the door, pretending not to hear. But her eyes shimmered. Elijah stared across the table, his pulse like fire. Every word they spoke was another cut. Every smirk, another wound. He had spent years building himself from the ground up, every sleepless night, every rejection, every door slammed in his face. He had fought for respect in rooms just like this one, but tonight they hadn't insulted him. They had humiliated the one person he loved most in the world. When dessert came, no one touched it. The air was brittle. Richard lifted his glass. "To new beginnings," he said. "To the future of Carter Dynamics and Holloway Tech." Elijah didn't raise his glass. He looked across the table at Richard. Chase, Margaret, and then at his mother, standing silently by the door. And something in him broke. He stood slowly. "I'd like to make a toast, too," he said. The room turned. The silence was heavy. "To my mother," Elijah said, his voice steady. "The woman who worked 3 jobs to make sure I could go to school. The woman who believed in me when no one else did. The woman who taught me that dignity is worth more than money." Richard's expression tightened. "That's touching, Elijah, but—" Elijah cut him off. "No, Richard. You don't get to butt that." Every face turned toward him. He looked around the room, his voice growing sharper. "See, tonight I was supposed to sign a $900 million deal. A deal I worked years for. But somewhere between the champagne and the laughter, I realized something." He turned to Chase, who had gone pale. "I realized I don't need to do business with people who can't see the worth in others. especially the people who raised me." A gasp rippled through the room. "Elijah," Richard started. But Elijah's hand cut through the air. "I'm canceling the deal." The words hit like thunder. Grace's eyes widened. "Elijah, baby, don't." He turned to her, his tone softening instantly. "Mom, they don't get to make you feel small." "Not ever." Then he looked back at Richard. "You see, Richard, legacy isn't built by bloodlines or last names. It's built by character. And tonight I saw yours clearly." He turned, took his mother's hand, and began walking toward the door. Behind him, Richard's voice roared, "You'll regret this, Carter! You're walking away from power." Elijah didn't even turn. Power means nothing if you lose your soul. The doors closed behind them. Outside, the cold night air hit like freedom. Grace's hands trembled. "Elijah, that deal was everything you worked for." He smiled faintly, eyes still burning. "No, Mom, you were everything I worked for." They stood under the streetlights, the Manhattan skyline glowing behind them. One mother and her son, the world watching, unaware that tonight's decision would ignite a storm no one could stop. Rain poured over Manhattan that night, turning the streets into rivers of silver. The city that once applauded Elijah Carter's every move now watched in silence, whispering behind tinted windows and glowing phone screens. It had only been 3 days since the dinner, 3 days since Elijah had walked out of the Holloway mansion and blown up a deal worth almost $1 billion. To the media, it was madness. To Wall Street, it was suicide. To Elijah, it was principle. But principles come with a price. Carter Dynamics headquarters, a 60-story tower of glass and steel in downtown Manhattan, stood tall, but inside, the atmosphere was anything but steady. Executives murmured in tight circles. Phones buzzed. News tickers on plasma screens screamed headlines. Breaking, Carter Dynamics CEO cancels $900 merger. Holloway stocks surge, while Carter shares plummet 22%. An emotional decision? Analysts question. Elijah Carter's judgment, insiders, say board, may consider emergency. Vote inside the top-floor office. Elijah stood by the window, watching the rain blur the city lights. His reflection stared back. The confident CEO now carrying the weight of 1,000 doubts. His assistant, Tara Jenkins, entered quietly. "Elijah, the board's waiting in conference room 1A. He turned slowly. "Let them wait 5 minutes." Tara hesitated. "Sir, they're nervous. Holloway Group's PR team is painting you as unstable. They're calling your decision a meltdown." He smiled faintly. "Good. That means it scared them." The boardroom was a Cold War zone. 12 of the company's most powerful stakeholders sat around a marble table, each with a copy of the Wall Street Journal in front of them, Elijah's face on the cover. At the head of the table sat Martin Lowell, the CFO, white, mid-50s, seasoned and visibly furious. "Elijah," Martin began, "I'll be blunt. What the hell were you thinking?" Elijah sat, unflinching. "I was thinking about what kind of people we partner with." "This isn't about ethics," another board member snapped. "It's about survival. The Holloways control supply chains, patents, international networks. We needed that merger." "We don't need them," Elijah said calmly. Martin slammed his hand on the table. "The stock is down 22% in 3 days. Investors are panicking. Do you realize how much we've lost?" Elijah leaned forward, his voice steady. "You can recover money. You can't recover respect." A murmur rippled through the room. "Respect doesn't pay dividends," another member hissed. "No," Elijah said, "but it builds legacies." He stood, eyes sweeping the room. "You all wanted a CEO who could win deals, but maybe what you really needed was one who could stand for something." The room went silent. Then Martin spoke quietly. "You're gambling with 12,000 employees' livelihoods. Do you understand that?" Elijah's voice softened. "I understand it better than anyone. I built this company for people who believed we could compete without selling our soul." Martin sighed, leaning back. Then I hope your soul can pay the bills. He slid a folder across the table. A document peeked out. Stamped confidential. What's this? Elijah asked. An emergency board review, Martin said coldly. We're calling a vote of confidence. Tomorrow morning. Elijah's jaw clenched. You're trying to remove me? No, Martin said. We're trying to save the company. That night, Elijah sat alone in his office. The city sprawled before him like a sleeping beast. The rain had stopped, but thunder still growled in the distance. Tara entered with a folder. You need to see this. She handed him a stack of printed emails and social media posts. They're attacking your mother, she said quietly. Elijah froze. The headlines burned across the pages. Grace Carter. The reason her son lost 900 $? Sources say Carter's emotional attachment clouded his judgment. From maid son to CEO, the humble origins of Elijah Carter. Did his mother embarrass him into a bad decision? Elijah's hand tightened on the papers until his knuckles turned white. Tara whispered, The Halloways are behind this. Their PR machines pushing it everywhere. He dropped the papers. They're trying to break me. She looked at him. What are you going to do? Elijah stared out at the skyline. Fight fire with integrity. That night, Elijah couldn't sleep. The rain returned, tapping softly on his penthouse windows. He sat by the window, staring into the dark, lost in thought and memory. He was 8 years old again. Atlanta, a small kitchen, the smell of cornbread and engine oil from the garage next door. His mother, Grace, was sitting at the table sewing a torn work uniform. He had come home crying that day. Another kid had called him poor boy and laughed at his worn-out shoes. Why do they laugh at us, Mama? He'd asked. Grace had looked at him, her eyes full of love and steel. They laugh because they don't understand what strength looks like, baby. You let them laugh, and then you outwork every one of them. She took his hand. Never let pride be the reason you fall, but never let shame be the reason you bow. He had carried those words all his life. Morning light spilled into the living room. Grace stood by the window, watching the city wake up. Elijah walked in, still in yesterday's suit, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. She turned. You haven't slept. I can't, he said. They're trying to destroy everything we built. Grace sighed. You knew it wouldn't be easy, baby. He looked at her, frustration bleeding through. I knew it'd be hard, Mom, but I didn't expect them to drag you through the mud. She walked closer, her voice gentle but firm. Elijah, I've been through worse than bad words. You think I care what rich folks say about me? I care what you say about yourself. He looked away. The board's voting to remove me today. She lifted his chin. Then remind them who you are. He nodded slowly. Yeah, maybe it's time they remembered. The boardroom was packed. Reporters waited outside. Cameras lined the hallway. Inside, the board sat stiffly, the air thick with anticipation. Martin cleared his throat. We are here to vote on whether Elijah Carter shall remain CEO of Carter Dynamics. He looked at Elijah. Before we proceed, you may make a statement. Elijah stood, buttoning his jacket. His mother watched from the doorway, unnoticed by most. He took a slow breath. Thank you. I'll be brief. He looked each board member in the eye. When I started this company 10 years ago, I had no investors. No family connections, just a vision, to build something that treated innovation as more than profit and people as more than numbers. He paced slowly. The Halloway deal would have made us rich, but it would have also made us compromised, and I won't sell out our integrity to people who think respect is optional. Martin scoffed. Integrity doesn't pay employees. Elijah's eyes flared. It's the only reason they trust you to pay them. A murmur of agreement rippled faintly among the staff watching through the glass wall. He continued, voice rising. We've forgotten what business is supposed to be about. Creating value, not vanity. We don't need Holloway's approval to change the world. We just need courage. He stopped, eyes locked on the board. So go ahead. Vote. But remember, every great company has a defining moment where it decides who it really is. This is ours. Silence. Martin swallowed. All in favor of removal? Hands went up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Half the room hesitated. Then 5. Elijah Carter retains his position as CEO, Martin said flatly, by a single vote. A quiet gasp spread. Elijah exhaled slowly, relief, pride, and exhaustion colliding at once. Grace smiled softly from the door, eyes wet with pride, but before Elijah could speak again, his phone buzzed. He looked down. An unknown number. A single text message. You might have kept your title, but you won't keep your company. Check your inbox. He opened his email. Subject line, urgent, federal investigation. Notice? He froze. Attached was a letter from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, informing him that Carter Dynamics was under investigation for insider trading. Back in his office, Elijah threw the papers on the desk. Tara looked pale. They filed a complaint, said you sold stock before the merger announcement. That's a lie, Elijah snapped. I didn't sell a single share. They've got records showing a transfer from your account the day before you canceled the deal. He frowned. That's impossible. Tara hesitated. Unless someone planted it. Elijah's mind raced. The Halloways. He grabbed his phone, dialing a number. Chase Halloway, he said when the line picked up. You went too far this time. On the other end, Chase's smug voice oozed through. I told you, Elijah, you walk away from us. We walk right over you. You forged financial records, Elijah growled. Chase chuckled. Call it creative accounting. The feds don't know that yet. You're playing dirty, Chase. That's how power works, Chase said softly. You should have learned that before trying to sit at our table. Elijah's eyes darkened. I'll see you in court. No, Chase said. You'll see me on CNN. The line went dead. By nightfall, the headlines were everywhere. Carter Dynamics under federal investigation. CEO accused of insider trading. Was Elijah Carter's outburst a cover for financial crimes? Halloway family, shocked and saddened by Carter's actions. The media framed him as unstable, corrupt, emotional. Everything they wanted the world to believe. Stock prices nosedived another 30%. Investors fled. Clients canceled contracts. Carter Dynamics, once a symbol of black excellence and innovation, was now painted as a cautionary tale. In his penthouse, Elijah sat in darkness, his phone buzzing endlessly. He didn't answer, didn't move, didn't speak. Mr. Carter, I've seen the documents. You're right, and I can prove more. But you need to be careful. The Halloways have people in the Justice Department. They're planning something. Elijah stared at the screen. Something? Adrian replied seconds later. They're not trying to silence you. They're trying to frame you. Elijah's pulse quickened. Frame me for what? No reply. Then his phone vibrated. A call from Tara. Elijah, you need to get out. Now. They're raiding the building. He froze. Who? Federal agents. But I think they're working for the Halloways. Sirens wailed in the distance. Flashing red lights cut through the night outside the Brooklyn loft. Elijah grabbed his laptop, shoving it into a backpack. Tara, Malik, and Priya scrambled to wipe drives and destroy sensitive equipment. Back door! Elijah shouted. They rushed through the narrow hallway as the front door shattered open. Armed agents stormed in, shouting, FBI! Hands in the air! They bolted through the back exit, sprinting down an alley slick with rain. Bullets didn't fly, but flashlights and shouts echoed through the maze of metal and brick. They ducked into an abandoned subway entrance, hearts pounding. Tara gasped. How did they find us so fast? Elijah looked up, realizing. There's a mole. 2 days later, hiding in an old factory basement in Queens, Elijah stared at his dwindling team. Malik was gone. He'd vanished after the raid, leaving only a note. "I can't keep running." Tara was exhausted. Priya was scared. Grace tried to stay strong, but the tension was eating at her too. Elijah sat silently for a while, then said softly, "Someone sold us out." Tara shook her head. "You think it was Malik?" Elijah didn't answer. He just looked at the wall. Photos of the Halloways, maps, documents, a war board of revenge. Finally, he spoke. "Doesn't matter. Betrayal only proves we're close to something." He turned, fire returning to his voice. "They've taken everything from me. My name, my freedom, my peace. Now I'll take the one thing they can't buy. The truth." Night fell. Elijah sat alone, typing on his laptop, a live stream scheduled for dawn, promising the final revelation. Grace watched him from the shadows, worry etched in her face. "Elijah, what are you planning?" He looked at her. "I'm going to finish this. Once and for all," she took his hand. "Promise me you won't lose yourself in the fight." He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "I won't, Mom, I'm doing this for you." But when she turned away, his smile faded. His eyes burned with quiet fury. He whispered to himself, "They wanted a war. I'll give them one." As he hit save, his screen flickered. A video feed appeared, Chase Holloway smirking in a dark office. "Still fighting, Carter? You should have stayed in your place." Elijah froze. "How did you get into this feed?" Chase grinned. "You're not the only genius in the room. And by the time the sun rises, you'll be a fugitive in every state." The call ended. The screen went black, and then a knock at the door. 3 sharp, deliberate knocks. Grace's voice trembled. "Elijah, who is that?" He looked toward the door, his body tensing. Another knock, then silence. He whispered, "Stay back." He reached for the doorknob. Rain poured over Manhattan like the heavens themselves had decided to cleanse the streets of sin. Lightning split the skyline, casting sharp white flashes across the windows of Carter Tower. The glass monument Elijah Carter had built from sweat, vision, and 1,000 sleepless nights. Inside, the atmosphere was different now. Whispers replaced laughter. Fear replaced confidence. The empire that once shone like gold now trembled under a storm of lies, lawsuits, and sabotage. Elijah stood before a massive screen showing collapsing stock graphs, Carter Dynamics, 47% flashing in red. Around him sat his board, 12 men and women who once called him visionary, now staring at him like he was a liability. "Mr. Carter," said Daniel Reed, the CFO, rubbing his temples, "our investors are panicking. The Holloway press machine is relentless. They've painted you as unstable, a man who blew up a $900 million deal over personal pride." Elijah's jaw flexed. "Over dignity, Daniel." "Not pride," Daniel sighed. "Whatever you call it, it's costing us everything." From the corner, Ava Mitchell, the company's head of legal, added quietly, "They're accusing us of intellectual property theft. Claims are baseless, but the headlines stick." Elijah turned toward the window, the city glowing below through sheets of rain. His reflection stared back. Tired eyes, dark circles, a man who'd carried too much for too long. "How bad?" he asked softly. Ava hesitated. "Bad enough that our partners are reconsidering contracts. Our suppliers, too." Daniel leaned forward. "You need to apologize, Elijah. Make peace. Issue a statement saying it was all a misunderstanding." Elijah turned, eyes blazing. "You want me to kneel to them? After what they did to my mother?" Daniel's face hardened. "I want to save this company." Elijah slammed his hand on the table. "We built this from nothing. You think I'll sell my soul for stability?" The room went silent. He looked around at the faces that had once believed in him, now clouded with doubt. "Anyone who wants to walk," he said finally, voice steady. "Walk now. I won't stop you. But I will not let those people win by destroying who I am." No one moved, but the silence said everything. Loyalty. It was cracking, thin as glass. That evening, as the rain eased, Elijah sat alone in his penthouse office. city lights flickering below like a dying heartbeat. The elevator chimed. He turned, surprised, as Grace Carter stepped out, holding a small brown paper bag. "Mom," he said, standing up. She smiled softly. "I figured you skipped dinner again." He managed a faint smile. "You didn't have to come all the way here?" She placed the bag on his desk. "You're my son." "I go where I'm needed," he sighed, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, it's bad. The company's falling apart. The press calls me impulsive, emotional. They're saying I'm proof that people like me can't handle power." Grace reached across the table, gently taking his hand. "Let them talk." He shook his head. "They're winning, Mom. They're bleeding me dry with lies. Investors, partners, even my own board, they're turning." Grace smiled sadly. "Baby, when people can't reach your level, they try to drag you back down to theirs." He looked up, eyes red. "But they're not dragging me, Mom. They're dragging your name." Her voice softened. "Elijah, I didn't raise you to be afraid of storms. I raised you to be one." He looked at her, the strength in her voice igniting something deep inside him, something he'd almost lost. She continued. "They can take your company. They can take your money, but they can't take your truth unless you hand it to them." The next morning, Elijah arrived at Carter Tower to find the media swarming the steps. Cameras flashed, microphones pointed, questions flew like arrows. "Mr. Carter, is it true your CFO has resigned? Are you under SEC investigation? Did you falsify your valuation numbers?" He pushed through silently, his jaw tight. Inside, chaos. Staff whispering. Screens flashing new headlines. He stormed into the boardroom and froze. Daniel Reed stood at the head of the table, flanked by lawyers and security officers. Ava was there too, pale and shaking. "Elijah," Daniel said calmly, "effective immediately, the board has voted to remove you as CEO." Elijah blinked. "What?" "It's over," Daniel said. "The shareholders believe you've become a liability. We're appointing an interim CEO, myself, to stabilize things." Elijah's hands curled into fists. "You sold us out to Halloway, didn't you?" Daniel didn't deny it. "I did what was necessary to save this company." Elijah laughed bitterly. "Save it? You just handed it over." Two security guards stepped forward. Ava stood up suddenly. "This is wrong! Daniel, you can't—" Daniel cut her off coldly. "Sit down, Ava." Elijah's voice dropped to a low, lethal calm. "You think this ends here?" "You're wrong." Daniel's tone turned smug. "No, Elijah, you're wrong. You forgot something. Business doesn't care about feelings." He gestured to the guards. "Escort him out." The images spread like wildfire. Black tech prodigy ousted from his own company. Elijah Carter loses control amid scandal. Was it pride or principle? Social media tore him apart. Analysts mocked him. Investors abandoned him. For the first time in 10 years, Elijah Carter woke up the next morning with nothing. No office, no company. No empire, just silence, and that silence was loud. He stayed off the grid for weeks. No interviews, no public appearances. The world thought he'd disappeared. But one night, sitting in his small apartment, the one he'd kept long before the penthouse, Elijah looked around and smiled faintly. The same desk, the same old laptop, the same hunger. Grace sat on the couch nearby, sewing quietly. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" she asked, not even looking up. He smiled. "If you're thinking about fighting back, then yeah," she chuckled softly. "That's my boy." Elijah leaned forward, eyes burning again, not with pride, but with purpose. "They took the name," he said. "But they didn't take the vision. I still have everything that matters, the patents, the ideas, and the truth." Grace looked up. "So what now?" Elijah stood. "Now we start again. From the ground up. This time, we build something they can't touch." He called Ava. "Ava, it's time," he said. "We're launching something new. Not just a company, a movement." She hesitated. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. What's it called?" Elijah looked out the window at the rising sun cutting through the clouds. "Phoenix Systems." Ava smiled slowly. "Because you're rising from the ashes?" He smirked. "No, because this time we'll burn them back." As they hung up, Elijah's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. A text. You think you can start over? We're watching every move you make. C.H. Elijah stared at it for a long moment, then locked his phone, his expression unreadable. Let them watch, he murmured. The show's just getting started. He turned to his mother, eyes blazing with reborn fire. Mom, they took my company, he said. Now I'll take their legacy. The city slept. But in a small, dimly lit workspace in Brooklyn, a spark had come alive. Blueprints were scattered across the table. Laptop screens glowed with lines of code and schematics. The hum of machines filled the air, and in the center of it all, Elijah Carter, sleeves rolled up, eyes locked on his vision like a man possessed. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about redemption. All right, said Ava Mitchell, standing beside him, hands on her hips. We've got a name, we've got a mission. But no funding, no office, and no one willing to touch us because of the Holloway blacklist. Elijah smiled faintly. That's exactly how Carter Dynamics started. Ava sighed. You realize the Holloways are watching, right? They'll crush you the second they smell success. He looked up from his laptop. Let them try. Ava tilted her head. You really think you can rise again? Without investors? Elijah leaned back, confidence radiating. I don't need investors. I need believers. He opened a folder on the desk. Inside were letters, hand-signed, from hundreds of small black-owned tech startups, inventors, and engineers who'd reached out after his fall. He said quietly, when the world turned its back on me, they didn't. They said I gave them hope. That means I owe them something bigger. Ava smiled faintly. So what's the plan? Elijah's voice was calm but sharp. We build a decentralized, transparent tech network. No middlemen, no corporate control. Open source, community-driven. A system so pure even the Holloways can't buy it. Ava blinked. You're not rebuilding Carter Dynamics. He smirked. No, I'm building its replacement. Weeks turned into months. Word began to spread, quietly but fast. A mysterious project called Phoenix Systems was gaining traction in underground tech circles. It promised to revolutionize how corporations handled data. Open, secure, and owned by users, not billionaires. And its founder? The man the world thought was finished. The streets started calling him the Phoenix CEO. YouTubers analyzed his downfall. Communities rallied behind his message. And soon, what started in a basement began attracting attention from the one thing even the Holloways couldn't buy: the people. At the top floor of Holloway Tower, a meeting unfolded. Chase Holloway paced the room, seething. How is this possible? He was supposed to be done! Richard Holloway sat behind a massive oak desk, calm but furious. Phoenix Systems is a PR stunt. It'll die out once the media moves on. Chase slammed a tablet on the desk, headlines flashing across the screen. Elijah Carter's Phoenix Systems raises $40 million in community crowdfunding. Tech underdog returns, and he's coming for the giants. Richard's jaw tightened. That's impossible, Chase glared. He's using the internet. Small donations, millions of them. It's like he turned the people into shareholders. Margaret Holloway, sipping her tea in the corner, spoke for the first time. That's what happens when you humiliate a man with purpose. He doesn't disappear. He evolves. Richard shot her a look. Not if we end him first. He picked up the phone. Get me Daniel Reed. Back in Brooklyn, the small team worked around the clock. The office was now a lively hub, engineers, programmers, and designers, all working under one vision. The walls were covered in handwritten notes: innovation, integrity, impact. Ava watched Elijah from across the room. He looked alive again, the fire in his eyes burning brighter than ever. But one night, as everyone left, she noticed something odd. Daniel Reed, Elijah's former CFO, had sent her an encrypted message. We need to talk, urgent, private. Her hands trembled slightly. She shouldn't even open it, but she did. The message read, Ava, they're coming after him again. Something big. Meet me, alone, midnight, Riverside Pier. Her heart pounded. Could she trust him? Or was this another trap? She closed her laptop. I have to go, she whispered to herself. The pier was silent, waves lapping under the moonlight. Daniel Reed stood there, trench coat soaked from drizzle, eyes darting around nervously. Ava approached slowly. "If this is some kind of setup—" "It's not," he interrupted, voice urgent. "Listen to me. The Halloways are planning something massive. They're launching a fake investigation and claiming Phoenix Systems is built on stolen Carter Dynamics IP. They're going to drag Elijah through court again." Ava's eyes widened. "But that's illegal?" "Yeah, but they don't care. They've already bought half the regulators." Ava's fists clenched. "Then we fight." Daniel shook his head. "You don't get it. This time, it's not about reputation. They want him arrested." Lightning flashed over the river. Ava stepped closer. "Then why are you telling me this?" Daniel looked haunted. "Because I betrayed him once, and I can't live with that." Before Ava could respond, headlights cut through the darkness. 3 black SUVs pulled up. Men in suits stepped out, faces hidden under caps. Daniel's eyes went wide. "They found me!" Gunshots shattered the night. Ava screamed as Daniel dropped to the ground, blood spreading across his chest. She ducked behind a crate, trembling as the men fired into the air. "Get the drive!" one shouted. Daniel, gasping, pressed a small flash drive into her hand. "Give this to Elijah. It's the proof." Then he went still. The men charged forward, but Ava was already running, sprinting through the rain-soaked alley, clutching the drive like her life depended on it. Because it did. She burst into Elijah's office hours later, drenched, shaking, and crying. "Ava, what happened?" he demanded, standing up. She slammed the flash drive on his desk. "Daniel's dead. The Halloways killed him. And this is what he died for." Elijah's face went pale. "What's on it?" "Evidence," she gasped. "Proof that the Halloways planted fake financial data in Carter Dynamics. Proof they orchestrated your downfall." Elijah's hands shook as he plugged in the drive. The screen filled with documents, forged signatures, secret transfers, audio files of Chase and Daniel discussing sabotage, Ava whispered. "He kept records. He planned to expose them. If anything happened to him—" Elijah stared at the screen, heart pounding. For the first time, the truth was in his hands, and with it, power. He leaned back in his chair, breathing hard. "This changes everything," Ava nodded. "We can take them down." Elijah looked up, eyes cold as steel. "No, we'll do more than that," she frowned. "What do you mean?" He smiled, a slow, dangerous smile. "We'll end their empire the same way they tried to end mine, publicly, completely, and legally." He turned to the window, where the first light of dawn touched the skyline. "Phoenix Systems will go public in 3 days. And during that announcement—" He lifted the flash drive. "We burn the Halloways with their own truth." 3 days later, the stage was set. Cameras flashed. Reporters gathered. The entire world waited to see if Elijah Carter's comeback was real or a dream. Grace stood backstage, watching her son adjust his tie. "You ready, baby?" she whispered. He looked at her, smiling softly. For the first time in a long time, yeah. But just before he stepped onto the stage, his phone buzzed. A message. "Unknown number. Step on that stage and your mother dies." He froze. The room blurred. The noise faded. His mother, standing only feet away, smiled proudly. Unaware. Elijah's fists clenched. Tears filled his eyes. For the first time, he didn't know whether to take the stage or run. The crowd buzzed like electricity. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted. Thousands of people filled the hall, investors, journalists, and ordinary dreamers who believed in one name again, Elijah Carter. But backstage, Elijah stood frozen, staring at his phone. The message still burned on the screen. "Step on that stage and your mother dies." CH. His pulse thundered in his ears. He looked up, through the curtain, and saw her. Grace Carter, sitting in the front row, smiling proudly, waving to him as if nothing in the world could go wrong. She didn't know. And he couldn't tell her. Ava stepped up beside him, noticing the color drain from his face. "Elijah, what's wrong?" He handed her the phone. She read it and froze. "Oh my God, is this real?" He nodded, voice hoarse. "Chase, it has to be him. Then we call the police." He cut her off. No time. The broadcast starts in 2 minutes. Ava's eyes widened. You can't go out there. They could be watching her right now. He stared at the crowd beyond the curtain, his mother's warm smile cutting through the chaos. If I don't go out there, he whispered, everything we fought for dies. All of it. Daniel's sacrifice, the truth, the people who believed. And if you do, she started. He met her eyes. Then I'll make sure my mother never has to fear anyone again. The announcer's voice echoed, Please welcome the founder and CEO of Phoenix Systems, Elijah Carter. The crowd erupted in applause. Elijah stepped onto the stage, every light blinding, every sound amplified, his heart hammering like a war drum. He scanned the audience. Grace was smiling, clapping, proud. He blinked hard, hiding the tears. Then he began. Good morning, he said, voice calm but deep. I stand before you not as a businessman, but as a son. The room quieted instantly. 2 years ago, I was humiliated, betrayed, and destroyed by people who believed they were untouchable. They thought their money could buy truth, that their power could bury dignity. He paused, scanning faces. They were wrong. He lifted the flash drive from his pocket. Tonight, I'm going to show you why, the audience murmured. This drive contains proof. Proof that the Holloway family fabricated data, bribed regulators, and orchestrated my downfall. But this isn't about revenge. He looked directly into the camera. This is about justice. For every person who's ever been told they don't belong at the table. A gasp rippled through the crowd as the screens behind him lit up, playing audio recordings of Chase Holloway's voice. Plant the documents. Make him look corrupt. No one will believe him. He's just another charity case who got lucky. Gasps and shouts erupted from the audience. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters stood to their feet. Elijah continued, voice steady. They called me unstable, emotional, unfit. But what they really meant was, they couldn't control me. He pressed another key, showing forged bank transfers. Signatures, secret emails from Holloway Tech. This, he said, is the truth they tried to bury. Suddenly, commotion near the stage. Security guards rushed toward the front row, where Grace Carter sat. A man in a dark coat stood behind her, hand reaching inside his jacket. Elijah froze. Mom! Screams erupted. The crowd scattered. A guard tackled the man. A gun clattered to the floor. Chaos filled the hall. Lights flashing, people shouting. Ava rushed onto the stage, grabbing Elijah. She's okay. She's safe! He looked and saw his mother, shaken but unharmed, being surrounded by security. The would-be attacker was dragged away, fighting and screaming. And as the world watched the live broadcast, the truth was undeniable. The Holloway family had gone too far. The FBI raided Holloway Tower that same night. By morning, every major news network was running the same headline, Holloway Empire Exposed. Evidence links family to corporate sabotage and attempted murder. Richard Holloway was arrested on federal charges. Chase fled the country but was caught weeks later trying to cross into Canada. Margaret disappeared from public life entirely. The world that had once bowed before the Holloways now spit their name out like poison, and the man they tried to destroy, he was everywhere. Months later, the world had changed. Phoenix Systems became the fastest-growing tech company in America. Its open-source technology was adopted by governments, schools, and hospitals, making data secure and transparent for everyone. Elijah refused to take it public. Instead, he made every employee a shareholder, every contributor an owner. The movement wasn't about him anymore. It was about everyone who'd ever been told they couldn't rise. One evening, Elijah sat on the balcony of his mother's new home overlooking the Atlanta skyline. Simple, peaceful, and glowing with sunset light. Grace walked out, carrying 2 mugs of tea. You're quiet tonight, he smiled softly. Just thinking about how far we've come, she chuckled. You've always been going places. He looked at her, eyes glistening. You remember that night at the mansion? Her smile faded slightly. I remember every second of it. I wanted to burn the world down, he said, but I realized Fire can destroy, or it can light the way. Grace smiled warmly. And you lit the way for a lot of people, baby. He handed her the locket she'd given him years ago. You kept me strong when I wanted to give up. She opened it. Inside, next to their old photo, was something new. A quote engraved on a small plate. Power means nothing if you lose your soul. E.C. Grace's eyes shimmered with pride. You kept your soul, Elijah, he smiled, because you taught me how. Months later, Elijah stood on a world stage, the United Nations Tech and Humanity Summit. Leaders, entrepreneurs, and students listened as he spoke about ethical innovation and dignity in leadership. He ended with words that echoed across nations. You can take a man's job, his company, even his name, but you can't take his truth. And when truth stands tall, no empire built on lies can survive the sunrise. The audience rose to their feet. The applause was thunder. And somewhere in the crowd, Grace Carter wiped her eyes, proud beyond words. Later that night, Elijah stood alone on a rooftop overlooking the city. The same skyline that once mocked him now glittered like 1,000 second chances. Ava joined him quietly. You did it, he smiled. We did. She looked at him curiously. So what now? Elijah turned toward the horizon where dawn was breaking. Now, he said softly, we help others rise. The wind carried his words into the glowing sky, and as the first rays of sunlight kissed the buildings, the world finally saw the man who refused to bow, and the mother who made him unbreakable.